This episode of the Demonic Compendium contains spoilers for the following games. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to a lopped-off new episode of the Demonic Compendium, the show where I discuss the mythology, design, and game history of your favorite Megami Tensei demons. Spring has officially sprung, but you know who won't be sprung anytime soon? Today's demon. Why? Well, you'll see. Just look, don't do anything this guy did, because today we're talking about Attis. Attis is a figure in ancient Phrygian mythology, which was part of the Anatolia, a peninsula in Western Asia. Many Phrygian myths eventually kinda blended in with Greek mythology due to Greek colonists along the coast and just general trade and cultural blending. There's actually a lot of scholarly debate over whether Attis was originally a Phrygian or Greek figure, and then some of it is like, oh, he was a Phrygian figure first, but he was more of a king instead of a god, and truthfully, I'm not gonna dive into all of that stuff, so for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna say he was a Phrygian god of vegetation and rebirth with connections to Greco-Roman mythology. Now, you can't really talk about Attis without discussing Attis's mom, and that gets a little tricky. So you have Attis, who was intersex, and the gods didn't like that, so they chopped off the meat into veg, which is sort of a running theme in this story, and buried it where it grew into an almond tree. And one day, the naiad nymph, Nana, became pregnant with Attis when an almond from the tree fell into her lap. Now, in some stories she held the almond to her bosom, and in others it was actually a pomegranate, but I'm gonna stick with the version where I get to say that Nana became pregnant when Attis' nut ended up in her lap, because why even bother doing this episode if I'm not gonna say that? Now, I'm gonna save the finer details of this for when I eventually do an episode on her, but long story short, some believe that Attis' castration allowed them to transform into the Great Mother Goddess, Cybele, and that's why Cybele is still seen as Attis' mom, despite Nana being the one who actually gave birth to him. Also, she ended up abandoning him, and he was raised by a goat. Attis became a proud shepherd and grew into an incredibly beautiful young man who eventually caught the eye of his mother, not Nana, but Cybele, who became obsessed with his beauty. She even attempted to sabotage Attis' own wedding to a human princess, which ends up being the last straw for him. Attis was so freaked out about Cybele hitting on him, apparently being one of the few Greek deities not cool with doing the tabooing, that he grabbed a knife and castrated himself to death beneath a pine tree. Which, I feel like that's not supposed to kill you, so I think it's safe to say he did a really bad job. But then Cybele was like,
Nuh-uh, no, mister, I do not accept this.
And begged the gods to stop Attis' body from decaying and eventually reviving him, which they did, and then I guess he admired that level of commitment from her, cause in some stories they started dating after that, which is why Attis is often referred to as Cybele's consort. Like a lot of figures in other mythologies, Attis' story is meant to represent the changing seasons, and is why he's often associated with nature, death, rebirth, and sacrifice. And all the mommy stuff, I guess. I feel like it's also worth mentioning that Attis has, dedicated followers, and to show their reverence, yeah, they're all eunuchs. I'd have probably just planted an almond tree or something, but I guess I'm just not that devoted. Attis' Compendium entry from Persona 5 Tactica refers to him as a Phrygian god who symbolizes life, death, and revival. He rejected Cybele's love and was driven mad, dying after he castrated himself. Cybele then resurrected him. Hey, real quick, if you like what I'm doing, please consider commenting, subscribing, maybe even checking out the Patreon. It honestly does all help a lot. Thanks so much, moving on. Design-wise, Attis has really only ever had the one look, and it's pretty solid. He's wrapped up in burial bandages like a mummy, and I can't say for certain if this was Kaneko's intention, but I like that the color and texture of it does kinda seem to resemble wood, making it seem like he is the tree that his body grew into in some versions of the story. The knife he's holding does seem to resemble depictions of ancient Phrygian paring knives, with the rounded pommel and curved blade, and I like the detail that his self-inflicted wounds are present on his arms and legs, except for the one actually holding the knife. I mean, that makes sense, right? It's probably pretty hard to use your arms to cut off both arms. According to Kaneko, this detail mainly stems from ancient tales of human sacrifices to Attis and Cybele being cut into multiple pieces like this. And obviously we can't really see it, what with the bandages and all, but I'm gonna say he did probably cut off the part that You know, he's famous for cutting off, leaving him as anatomically impaired as a Ken doll. Truthfully, my favorite aspect of Attis' design is that Kaneko actually gave him a familial resemblance to his mother, Cybele. Both figures have colorful skin with white striped patterns and curved horns. Not much of Attis' flesh is exposed, but I like that this detail is apparent all the same. I am a huge fan of when demons that are related actually look related. Like how Odin and Loki used to look somewhat similar. Also, I'm purely guessing here, but with that long yellow hair and the fact that Attis is supposed to be super beautiful, if you told me that Kaneko based Attis' design at least somewhat on the late Bjorn Andresen, I'd probably believe you. Bjorn inspired a lot of Japanese artists, and while I don't think Kaneko ever officially said it, some believe Bjorn was the inspiration for other Megaten figures like Louis Cypher and Narcissus. As far as game history goes, Attis is one of those demons that I really thought was like, in more things? Like, Castration Knife to my head, I'd have sworn he was at least in Soul Hackers too, but he's not. I guess it's because whenever he does show up, he usually leaves an impression. Despite them often appearing in the same games, Attis doesn't usually have that much of a gameplay connection to his mom with benefits. For example, they don't have a special battle conversation with one another in SMT5. However, in Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, Attis appears in Shinjuku during the Canon of Vengeance, and asks the Nahobino if we think he's beautiful, and how he wants to have gems to make himself even more beautiful for his mistress, before giving you the quest Shinjuku Jewel Hunter, where you have to deliver 2 diamonds, 3 emeralds, and 3 amethysts to him. But what's extra cool is that if you have Cybele in your party, the mistress that Attis was talking about, she'll pop out and have some unique dialogue with her son. The two have a nice reunion. Attis even says, "My heart is always with you," and he changes his quest dialogue to the Nahobino by saying he's doing this for her instead of his unnamed mistress. At the end of the quest, the two talk even more, where Attis says he only desires to be owned by her, body and soul, and Cybele reminds him that he belongs to her and that if he's a good boy, she'll love him back. So yeah, this is definitely post-resurrection Consort Attis. Attis has a surprisingly large role in the mobile title Shin Megami Tensei Liberation D2 as a major figure in Kangaroo Boxer's D2 quest. Zhengyun and Vagit recall the tale of when the former first became a devil downloader, and how even before he could control demons, he beat up Attis with his bare hands. The quest moves back and forth between flashbacks of Zhengyun and Vagit's relationship, and Newbie helping them track down Attis in the present day. It's honestly one of the better D2 quests in my opinion, and I really liked getting to learn more about Vagit beyond him just being the fusion guy. Attis also has a minor role in Auragate 2. On floor 19, players can find and fight Cybele, who asks if our goal is to make her our bitch. But she'll only actually fight you if Attis is in your party, where she'll proclaim that it's a huge turn-on. And after we beat her, we unlock her for fusion, and she says to call her if we want to have a good time. While you do need Attis to start this fight, he doesn't actually talk to her at all. Also, the reason I don't have my own footage of this is because for some reason, Cybele is just not in my game. I never beat her, I don't have her unlocked for fusion, I even had to submit a support ticket to Sega about this, and that is why this episode came out later than I planned. In Persona 3, Attis is the ultimate persona of the Hanged Man Arcana, and is unlocked for fusion by completing the social link with Maiko Ohashi. In earlier versions of Persona 3, fusing Attis required a special fusion of other Hanged Man personas, notably Inugami, Take Minakata, Orthrus, Voski, and Ubelurus. However, in the 3-make, you can just fuse him through normal means, possibly because they just wanted to cut down on special fusions, but also possibly because Ubelurus was replaced with Mata in that game. In Persona 3 Reload, leveling Attis up has him give players the Sacrifice God Wrap, which can be exchanged at the antique shop alongside some emeralds to get the Sacrificial Idol accessory, both obvious references to Attis' role as a god of sacrifice. And in episode Aegis, Attis is one of the personas used by Masked Boy in the epilogue chapter's ultimate hidden boss fight. Attis appears in Persona 4, once again as the ultimate persona of the Hanged Man Arcana, and he's unlocked for fusion after completing Naoki Konishi's social link. I know I sound like a broken record here, but Attis will very likely still be in Persona 4 Revival whenever that game comes out. However, whether he'll still be the unlockable persona for completing this social link in the upcoming remake remains to be seen. Attis appears in Persona 5, where he is, for the 3rd time in a row, the ultimate persona of the Hanged Man Arcana.
That makes it a hat trick.
And is unlocked for fusion by completing Munehisa Iwai's Confidant. In Persona 5 Royal, Attis has a unique persona trait, an element that I really should bring up more on this show, called Vitality of the Tree, in reference to the myths where Attis becomes
Pine Tree.
This trait allows him to use spells like Thermopylae even when your group is not surrounded, which is a super cheap full party heat riser, so that's honestly pretty sweet. Like, this is a really good ability. In the special challenge battle, Full Moon, the Seas Boy will use Attis as one of his personas, which is kind of funny to me that, like, in Persona 5, the Persona 3 protagonist uses Attis, and in Persona 3, the Persona 5 protagonist uses Attis. While Attis was absent from other Persona 5 side games like Strikers and the Phantom X, he does appear in Persona 5 Tactica as a burn-type sub-persona. And if ending a Demonic Compendium video on such a boring note makes you mad, please don't castrate yourself to death over it. And there you have it, Attis, the magnificent male modeling a mutilated manhood made manifest by monstrous motherly ministrations. Did I leave out something you thought was important? Was I just plain wrong about something? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to let me know who you'd like to see me talk about in future episodes. That's going to do it for this episode of the Demonic Compendium, and I will see you next time. But be careful while you rest that a demon doesn't take over your body.